Rain crashed against the mansion windows like the sky itself was mourning. Inside, Corinne Hartwell's hands trembled as she held her mother's last letter, ink fading, words heavy with secrets. "My darling girl," it began, "if you're reading this, I'm gone. And there's something you must know." The door burst open. Jasper Hartwell, the man who'd called himself her father for 20 years, stormed in, his eyes sharp and cold. "Put that down," he barked. "You've no right to pry into family matters." "Family?" Corinne laughed bitterly, her voice trembling. "You mean your family?" "Never mine." He stepped closer, the scent of whiskey on his breath. "You think you're one of us because Margaret pitied you. You were 7 when we took you in. 7? Don't forget what that means." "What it means," she whispered, clutching the letter, "is that I loved her more than you ever did." His slap came faster than she could breathe. The paper slipped from her hand, scattering across the marble floor like broken wings. That was the night Corinne Hartwell stopped being anyone's daughter. She left the mansion under the thunder's roar, the rain soaking her through as she walked away from everything she thought was family. She didn't know where she was going, only that she couldn't stay. 2 days later, she was sitting on a bus bound for Portland, staring out the fog window as raindrops drew rivers down the glass. Her phone buzzed, a message from Daniel Rivers. "Daniel, Corinne, please tell me what happened. I went to your house. They said you moved." "Corinne, it's over." "Daniel, I don't belong there." "I never did." "Daniel, you belong with me. Always have." Her chest ached at the sight of his words, but she couldn't answer. Not yet. Daniel Rivers had been the one person who'd seen her beyond the Hartwell name, the scholarship kid with the quiet fire. They'd met in university, and by the time graduation came, he'd already built his first company. By 27, he was the youngest billionaire in Texas. But to Corinne, he was just the man who made her feel like home, until Jasper Hartwell and his daughters tore that home apart. They'd whispered to Daniel that Corinne was using him for money, that she'd lied about her background, that she was unstable. He'd asked her to explain, but she'd been too humiliated, too broken to speak. And silence became their undoing. Now, 2 years later, Corinne worked at a small legal aid center in Portland, helping foster kids navigate the same system that had failed her. She rented a 1-room apartment above a bakery, lived on coffee and purpose, and never looked back. At least, not until the rain brought the past to her door again. One morning, her boss dropped a file on her desk. "We've been asked to assist with an adoption case," he said. "The Hartwell Foundation is funding the review. You'll need to attend their charity banquet this weekend." Corinne froze. "The Hartwell Foundation? Yeah, you okay?" She smiled faintly, though her stomach twisted. "Of course, just old connections." That night, she couldn't sleep. She pulled out the faded letter, Margaret's final words, and read it for the 100th time. "You were never my charity, Corinne. You were my promise to Sarah. She was my dearest friend. She made me swear to protect you if anything ever happened to her. There's more documents, a trust, something Jasper never wanted you to find. Follow the name on the envelope. It will lead you to the truth." The name was Eleanor Price, a lawyer in Austin. Corinne's hand shook as she dialed the number, heart racing. A woman's voice answered. "Eleanor Price speaking. Hi, my name is Corinne Hartwell. Margaret Hartwell was my adoptive mother. I found a letter with your name." The line went silent. Then Eleanor's voice softened. "I've been waiting for this call for 20 years. The next morning, Corinne was on a flight to Austin. Rain followed her there too, as if the sky refused to let her walk this path alone. When she arrived, Eleanor handed her a brown envelope stamped "Confidential, the estate of Sarah Matthews, your birth mother." Eleanor explained gently. "Sarah and Margaret were college roommates. When Sarah died, she left everything to you, a trust fund, a small ranch, and this." Inside the envelope was a faded photograph, Sarah smiling beside a young Margaret, and a birth certificate. Corinne Hartwell. Mother, Sarah Matthews. Guardian, Margaret Hartwell. "She didn't give you up," Eleanor said. "She entrusted you to her best friend. But Jasper found a way to twist that trust for his gain." Corinne's eyes burned. "He said I was lucky to be taken in." Eleanor shook her head. "You were never a charity. You were family. And they knew it." For a moment, Corinne just sat there, the weight of years collapsing in her chest. Then she asked the question that had haunted her since she was a child. "Why did Margaret stay with him?" "Because she loved you," Eleanor replied. and she thought she could protect you from him. But she couldn't. Not forever. When Corinne left the law office, the rain had stopped. For the first time in her life, the sky seemed to hold its breath. She walked to the old ranch on the outskirts of town, the one Sarah had left her. The place was quiet, the wooden gate creaking like an old friend. Inside, dust and memory lingered together. But it felt right. It felt hers. Her phone buzzed again. A known number. She almost ignored it until she heard his voice. Corinne. Her heart stopped. Daniel. I found out about the banquet, he said. I'll be there. You should be too. Why? Because some debts need to be settled in public. She hesitated. Daniel. Don't. But he'd already hung up. At night, under the Texas moon, Corinne made her choice. She would walk back into the Hartwell world not as a victim, not as a charity case, but as the rightful heir to her own name. And for the first time in years, she smiled. Because rain might wash away everything, but it also makes things grow again. The evening sky was bruised purple over Dallas when Corinne stepped out of the taxi, her pulse thundering louder than the live orchestra echoing from the ballroom. The Hartwell Foundation charity gala glittered in gold and glass, a monument to hypocrisy. Inside, the lead of Texas murmured beneath chandeliers, sipping champagne while pretending to save the world. Corinne tugged at the black service uniform that wasn't hers. She was supposed to be a guest speaker, legal advocate, invited to talk about adoption reform, but someone had accidentally swapped her assignment with catering staff. Now she carried a silver tray of drinks, watching the family that once called her theirs. Charlotte Hartwell, the oldest sister, floated through the crowd in a diamond gown, all smiles and poison. Careful, dear, she sneered as she brushed past Corinne. Wouldn't want you to spill on the guests again. Corinne's jaw clenched. I'll manage. Charlotte leaned closer, her perfume sharp and expensive. I thought you'd vanished. But here you are still serving, just like always. Corinne met her gaze without flinching. And you're still pretending your soul's clean. Charlotte's smile wavered. You've always had such a sharp tongue for someone who owes everything to us. I owe you nothing, Corinne said quietly. Not anymore. Before Charlotte could reply, a hush rolled through the hall. The announcer's voice boomed. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the President of the United States, accompanied by tech innovator and philanthropist, Mr. Daniel Rivers. The room erupted in applause. Corinne froze. He stepped through the archway, tall and composed in a black suit, his presence commanding even without trying. Daniel Rivers had always had that kind of quiet gravity, the kind that made everyone stop to listen. But tonight, his eyes searched the crowd until they found her, and for a heartbeat, everything stilled. The tray trembled in her hand. Their eyes locked across the sea of people, 2 years of silence burning between them like unspoken fire. Charlotte leaned toward her, voice dripping with mockery. Oh, look who still draws your attention. Don't embarrass yourself, Corinne. He's leagues above you now. Corinne didn't respond. She just turned, carrying the tray toward the service table before the shaking in her chest betrayed her. But Daniel didn't look away. After the president's brief speech, the room shifted to casual mingling. Jasper Hartwell approached Daniel with a politician's smile, extending a hand. Daniel Rivers. Good to finally meet the man changing the world one up at a time. Daniel accepted the handshake coolly. And you must be the man doing the same with other people's stories. Jasper's grin faltered. Pardon? Daniel's tone remained even. I've done some reading about the Hartwell Foundation. Impressive numbers. But I couldn't help noticing a few irregularities in your adoption funding records. Jasper's eyes darkened. I see you've been misinformed. We run a reputable Save It, Daniel interrupted softly. We'll talk about it soon. On stage, across the room, Corinne tried to disappear into the crowd, but Daniel's voice carried. Corinne. The sound of her name hit her like thunder. Heads turned. Charlotte smirked, whispering to her friends. Jasper straightened, trying to mask his irritation with a grin. Daniel walked toward Corinne, the crowd parting instinctively. You shouldn't be holding that tray, he said, his voice low but carrying warmth. You were invited to speak tonight. Corinne's throat tightened. They changed the program. I didn't want a scene. Well, Daniel said, eyes softening, then let's make one worth remembering. Before she could protest, he took the tray from her hands and set it on a nearby table. Then he turned to the nearest staff member. Get the coordinator, please, now. Whispers swept the room. Cameras turned. The gala was suddenly no longer just a charity event, it was a spectacle. Charlotte stepped forward, trying to reclaim control. "Mr. Rivers, I'm sure this is a misunderstanding." Corinne volunteered to help. Daniel tilted his head slightly. "Is that true?" Corinne met his gaze. "No, but it doesn't matter if it does," he said. "It always matters when people like you are silenced." The MC's voice crackled over the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, our next segment, a special announcement from Mr. Daniel Rivers." Jasper's face paled. "What announcement?" Daniel smiled faintly. "The truth." He walked up to the podium, and the ballroom's lights dimmed to spotlight him. His voice, calm but razor-sharp, carried through every corner of the room. "Many of you know me as an investor in technology," he began. "But tonight, I'm here for something else, something personal. I'm here because I owe a debt to someone in this room." Every camera turned. Every glass froze midair. "Years ago," Daniel continued, "a woman changed my understanding of love, truth, and courage. Her name is Corinne Hartwell." Murmurs erupted. Corinne's heart raced. Charlotte's face drained of color. "She was raised by the Hartwell family," Daniel said. "A family that publicly prides itself on charity and compassion. But what most of you don't know is that her adoption was never finalized. Not legally. That means, for 20 years, she was paraded as a symbol of their generosity while being denied every right, every inheritance, and every ounce of dignity she deserved." Gasps rippled across the room. Cameras flashed. Jasper stepped forward, furious. "That's enough. You have no idea what you're talking about." "Oh, I do," Daniel replied, holding up a small recorder. "Because this is your voice. Mr. Hartwell, recorded the night you told your daughters that Corinne was your escape clause, that you could throw her out whenever you pleased." The audio played through the speakers. Jasper's voice echoed, dripping with arrogance and cruelty. Corinne felt tears burn her eyes as she watched the faces in the crowd change from curiosity to disgust. When the recording ended, silence held the room like a storm about to break. Daniel turned to her. "You don't need to stay quiet anymore, Corinne. Tell them who you are." Her pulse thundered in her ears. Every instinct told her to run, but then she saw Margaret's face in her memory, kind and gentle, urging her forward. Corinne stepped to the microphone. Her voice trembled, but her eyes were steady. "My name is Corinne Hartwell. I was 7 when Margaret Hartwell took me in. She gave me love, education, and hope. But after she died, her family took everything from me. Tonight, I reclaim my name not because I need their approval, but because I finally know the truth." She looked at Jasper. "I am Sarah Matthews' daughter, Margaret's promise, and I will not let your lies define me any longer." Applause broke through the silence, tentative at first, then growing, rising like a wave. Jasper shouted, "You'll regret this." Daniel stepped forward. "No, sir. You will." Security appeared at the ballroom doors, followed by federal officers. "Mr. Hartwell," one said, "you're under investigation for fraud and misappropriation of charitable funds." Charlotte gasped, "Daddy." As they led him away, the crowd's murmurs turned to chaos. Cameras flashed. Donors whispered. Through it all, Daniel reached for Corinne's hand. "It's over," he said softly, but she shook her head. "No, it's just beginning." He smiled, pride shining through. "Then let's begin together." Outside, the rain had started again, gentle this time, like a benediction. Corinne stood beneath the awning, staring up at the storm. "Funny," she murmured, "it always rains when I change my life." Daniel chuckled. "Then may it rain forever." They laughed softly, the chaos behind them fading like old echoes. But deep down, Corinne knew the night wasn't finished yet. Because now that the truth was out, the world was watching, and she wasn't going to waste the chance to change it. By the next morning, Corinne's name was everywhere. The news anchors said it like a headline that sold well. "Charity heiress exposes billionaire family fraud." Her photo was splashed across websites. Her trembling voice replayed over and over on morning shows. Corinne turned off the television in her hotel room and let silence settle. She hadn't slept. Not after everything. Not after watching Jasper Hartwell handcuffed under the flash of 100 cameras. Her phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters, former classmates, strangers calling her a hero, others calling her ungrateful. Daniel knocked gently on the door before stepping in. He looked as tired as she felt, his tie loose, his hair slightly disheveled. "You've seen the coverage." Corinne nodded. They're turning it into a circus. He crossed the room, lowering his voice. That's what they do. But we can use it. The investigation into the foundation has opened a bigger case: systemic fraud in adoption funding. You could testify. Corinne leaned against the wall, arms crossed. You make it sound easy. It's not, Daniel admitted. But you have the one thing none of them do: the truth. She gave him a long look. You always were good at speeches. He smiled faintly. You always said I talked too much. They both laughed quietly. And for the first time in years, the sound didn't ache. Still, there was something between them: years of silence, of words left unsaid. Corinne walked to the window, staring at the rain tracing down the glass. You believed them, she said softly. Back then, when they told you I was using you. Daniel's breath caught. I did, for about an hour. Then I realized they were lying. But when I came to see you, you were gone. I was drowning, she said, voice breaking. I couldn't face you. I thought if I just disappeared, I'd stop being their story. He moved closer. You've always been more than their story. You were mine. She turned, meeting his gaze. And now, he said gently, I want to help you write the next chapter. Whatever it looks like. Corinne's lips trembled into a small smile. I don't need rescuing anymore. I know, Daniel said. That's what I love most about you. For a long moment, neither spoke. The air between them felt fragile, like a promise being rewritten. That afternoon, federal agents came by with updates. Jasper Hartwell faced charges of fraud, coercion, and embezzlement. Charlotte was being questioned for her role in falsifying adoption paperwork. As the agents left, Corinne exhaled slowly. It's surreal, she whispered. 4 years. I thought I'd imagine their cruelty. Now it's all documented, recorded, real. Daniel nodded. And because of that, other kids might be spared the same pain. Corinne stared at him. That's what this has to be about now, not revenge. Reform. He smiled. You sound like your mother. Her eyes softened. I'd like to think she'd be proud. Later that evening, Corinne returned to the ranch Sarah had left her. It was quiet under the twilight sky, the scent of rain lingering in the fields. Daniel followed her, keeping a respectful distance as she unlocked the front door. The house creaked with memory. Dust motes danced in the fading light. She found the old piano near the window, still faintly in tune. Her fingers touched the keys, hesitant, remembering melodies Margaret had taught her as a child. Daniel stood behind her, watching quietly. It's beautiful here. It was hers, Corinne said. My birth mother's. I never knew. Now you do. She played a few soft notes, her voice trembling. You know, I used to dream about this place. Somewhere I belonged. Somewhere nobody could send me away. He sat beside her on the piano bench. You built that place inside yourself, Corinne. The rest is just walls and paint. She laughed quietly. That's something Margaret would have said. They stayed there for hours. The silence between them comfortable for once. By morning, Corinne made her decision. She called Eleanor Price and said, I want to reopen my mother's foundation, but differently. Transparent, accountable. For kids who aged out of adoption without belonging anywhere. I want to call it the Rainlight Project. Eleanor smiled through the phone. That's poetic. Why that name? Because, Corinne said softly, rain is what washed away everything false in my life. And light is what's left. Word spread fast. Within a month, the Rainlight Project became a national headline, a grassroots movement for adoption reform and oversight. Corinne spoke before Congress, her voice steady as she shared her story. Lawmakers listened. Cameras rolled. Daniel stood at the back of the hearing room, watching her with quiet awe. When she stepped outside, microphones swarmed her. Ms. Hartwell, how does it feel to confront the system that failed you? She smiled faintly. It doesn't feel like confrontation. It feels like healing. A reporter shouted. Are you and Mr. Rivers working together now? Corinne glanced at Daniel. You could say that. That night, they drove out to the ranch again. The moon hung low, painting everything silver. I saw you on the news, Daniel said. You didn't flinch once. I was terrified, she admitted. But I kept thinking if I could survive that house, I could survive anything. He chuckled softly. That's the Corinne I remember. They walked to the edge of the field, where rainwater shimmered in small puddles. She kicked off her heels and stepped barefoot into the mud, laughing. I used to be so afraid of getting dirty. Now look at you, Daniel teased. Now I own the dirt, she said, grinning. He joined her, the two of them laughing as the rain began again, slow and warm. It wasn't the stormy kind anymore, just soft drops falling like forgiveness. Daniel took her hand. You know, I've built empires, signed billion-dollar deals, met presidents. None of it ever felt like this. Like what? She asked. Like peace. Corinne's smile faded to something gentler. You really waited for me. 2 years, he said. And every day after that, if I had to. She stepped closer, rain sliding down her skin. You don't have to wait anymore. Their kiss was quiet, the kind that rewrote history, the kind that didn't need words. When they finally pulled apart, he whispered, What now? Now? Corinne looked up at the rain. Now we build something real. Over the next few months, they did exactly that. The Rainlight Project partnered with major tech firms and legal organizations, helping thousands of children find permanent homes. Corinne became a national advocate, appearing on talk shows and policy panels, her calm grace disarming even her harshest critics. Daniel remained by her side not as her savior, but as her partner. Together they used his influence and her voice to create change. And yet, late at night, Corinne would sometimes step outside onto the ranch porch and let the rain fall on her face. The memories still came: Margaret's laughter, Sarah's photograph, the sting of Jasper's cruelty, but they no longer hurt. They reminded her of how far she'd come. Daniel would find her there, arms wrapped around herself, eyes on the storm. Can't sleep, he'd ask. I'm just thinking, she'd reply, about how the rain always finds its way back here. Maybe because it knows where it belongs, he'd say, drawing her close. And in that simple embrace, she realized something. Home wasn't the house, or the name, or even the love she'd found. It was the peace she'd made with her own story. 6 months later, the sky over Montana burned gold and rose as the sun slipped behind the hills. The ranch, once silent, now hummed with life, volunteers moving between barns, children laughing near the stables, the faint sound of music drifting from the open windows. It was opening day for the Rainlight Project home, a permanent residence for children who had aged out of adoption care. Corinne stood by the porch railing in a simple cream dress, her hair pulled into a loose braid. She watched as the first group of teens walked through the gates, their faces a mix of awe and disbelief. Daniel stepped up beside her, his sleeves rolled, his hands slightly dusty from carrying boxes himself. You did it, he said quietly. Corinne smiled. We did it. You know what I mean, he said, looking at her with that familiar warmth. You turned your pain into something that breathes. She looked toward the horizon, where rain clouds gathered faintly but didn't threaten. I think pain just needs somewhere to live. Once it finds purpose, it stops haunting you. Daniel brushed his hand against hers. And what about love? Where does that live? Corinne turned to him, eyes glistening. Right here, she said softly, placing his hand against her chest. The moment lingered. The air still, filled with unspoken peace. Inside, the celebration began. Local press, donors, and former adoptees filled the hall. The walls were lined with portraits of children who'd found homes through the program. Above the stage, a mural painted by one of the teens read, Every storm leaves water for growth. Corinne stood at the podium, her heart thudding as the audience quieted. When I was 7, she began, her voice clear and steady. I was adopted into a family that believed love could be owned. 4 years, I tried to earn that love through grades, through obedience, through silence. But love isn't a transaction. It's not something you win. It's something you build, freely, without fear. She paused, eyes scanning the crowd. Today, this home stands for every child who was told they weren't enough. For every foster youth who aged out thinking they were invisible. You are seen. You are wanted. You are enough. Applause rose, echoing through the room. Daniel clapped the loudest, his eyes shimmering. When the noise died down, Corinne added, And to those who stood beside me, even when I couldn't see my own worth, thank you. This project isn't my legacy. It's our redemption. The crowd stood, some crying openly. As she stepped down from the podium, Daniel took her hand, guiding her outside where the late afternoon rain began to fall soft. Warm, forgiving, children rushed out, laughing and twirling in it, their shoes splashing through puddles. Corinne joined them, barefoot, spinning with her arms open wide. Daniel laughed, calling after her, You're going to ruin that dress. Then, it'll have a story. She shouted back, drenched and radiant, The music from inside blended with the sound of the rain, and for the first time, she didn't flinch at the thunder. Because now, every storm meant renewal. Weeks turned into months. The foundation flourished. Adoption laws began changing, inspired by Corinne's congressional testimonies and Daniel's tech funding initiatives. Together, they became a symbol not of wealth and status, but of rebuilding, of second chances. One evening, the ranch was quiet again. The guests had left, the children were asleep, and the lights shimmered soft amber against the rain-streaked windows. Daniel sat by the fireplace, reading through proposals. Corinne entered, barefoot as always, holding a small box. He looked up. "What's that?" She smiled. "A letter. Margaret's last one. I found it tucked behind the piano." He set the papers aside, curiosity flickering. "Are you ready to read it?" "I think so." She unfolded it carefully, the paper slightly yellowed. "My dear girl." It began in Margaret's graceful handwriting. "If you are reading this, it means the truth has found you and I am at peace. I always knew you would rise above the pain, Corinne. You are not the storm that broke you. You are the rain that healed everything it touched. Love freely, live bravely, and never let anyone convince you that belonging must be earned. It is your birthright." Corinne's tears fell softly. "She knew everything," she whispered. Daniel reached for her hand. "She believed in you before anyone else did." Corinne nodded, smiling through her tears. "And now, yet to do that for others." She looked up at him, eyes shining with a different kind of certainty. "Daniel, let's adopt. Not to fill a void, but to give what we never had, a forever kind of love." He blinked, taken aback, then smiled slowly. "You mean it?" She nodded. "A little boy named Leo. He's 9. Been in the system too long. He deserves a chance." Daniel stood, wrapping his arms around her. "Then let's bring him home." The next scene unfolded weeks later. The courthouse, small and bright. Corinne and Daniel stood before the judge, Leo clutching both their hands. The boy's eyes darted nervously until Corinne knelt to meet his gaze. "Hey," she said softly, "you're safe now. No one's ever going to make you feel unwanted again." "Okay," Leo nodded, his small voice trembling. "Okay." The judge smiled. "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Rivers. He's officially your son." Corinne exhaled a laugh through her tears. Daniel lifted Leo into his arms, spinning him around. The room erupted in applause. Outside, rain began to fall again because of course it did. It always did. Months later, a local journalist filmed a short documentary about the Rainlight Project. The final scene showed Corinne, Daniel, and Leo walking through the ranch fields at sunset.